and I couldn't take it in. For days, I just couldn't believe that he was gone. I just knew it was a tragedy. I've got a younger brother, just a year and a half younger than me, and I couldn't help but think of him. The whole world seemed to hold its breath when the news about Paul McCartney, the living legend of the Beatles, suddenly flooded the headlines. A series of shocking titles appeared at once. Paul McCartney detained for questioning. The legend taken to authorities after collapsing at his home. Within minutes, social media exploded, and millions of fans were left wondering what was truly happening to the man who once wrote, "Hey Jude," and "Let It Be." Many still remember that more than 40 years ago, McCartney was arrested in Japan for a serious customs violation, an incident that almost ended his career. And now, at over 80 years old, the fact that he was once again escorted from his home by medical and police teams led the public to draw haunting parallels with the nightmare of 1980 repeating itself. Whatever the true cause, fear spread faster than ever. The question that made millions tremble in silence remained the same. Could this be the final chapter for Paul McCartney, the last man standing of the Beatles? Many sources suggested that the real reason behind this incident didn't come from anything new but from old wounds, the legal scars that had followed him for over half a century. In his attempt to reclaim control over his musical legacy, McCartney may have unknowingly turned himself into a man at odds with the world. To understand why McCartney became the center of so many legal storms, one must go back to 1970, the year he triggered one of the biggest shocks in modern music history. That year, the Beatles, the greatest band of the 20th century, fell apart in chaos. After John Lennon announced he was leaving, Paul McCartney did the unthinkable. He filed a lawsuit against his three bandmates, John, George, and Ringo, to dissolve Apple Corps, the company that owned all the Beatles' assets, copyrights, and brand name. McCartney wanted freedom, but the price he paid was becoming the enemy of the entire music world. The press called him the man who killed the Beatles. While Lennon and Harrison publicly lashed out, Ringo Starr stayed silent, but also cut ties. The High Court of London took up the case at the end of 1970, and for months, McCartney lived under extreme pressure. Journalist Ray Connolly, who closely followed the Beatles, wrote that Paul suffered from insomnia, lost his appetite, and dropped nearly 6 kilograms in just 2 weeks. He wrote in his diary, "I stay up until 3 in the morning just asking myself if I'm doing the right thing." Finally, in March 1971, McCartney won the case. He regained financial control but lost almost everything else, his friends, his band, and the respect of many. The Guardian at the time ran the headline, "Martin wins, but at what cost?" After the verdict, McCartney withdrew to his farm in Scotland, living in seclusion for months with his wife Linda and their children. Friends recalled that he would often wake up in the middle of the night, pick up his guitar, and sing softly, not to compose, but to make sure he could still hear himself alive. In a rare 1984 interview, he said, "I don't regret protecting my music, but I regret having to do it by standing against the people I love the most." But the tragedy didn't end there. A decade later, Paul McCartney's name hit global headlines again. This time, not from a recording studio, but from Narita Airport in Tokyo. On January 16, 1980, McCartney landed with his band Wings to begin their Asia tour. But within minutes of passing through customs, everything collapsed. Officials discovered 219 grams of an illegal substance carefully packed inside his luggage, an amount that could have earned him up to 7 years in prison under Japanese law. As police escorted him through a crowd of flashing cameras, McCartney kept his head down, pale and silent, an image that immediately spread worldwide. BBC News broke the story. Paul McCartney arrested in Japan for drug possession. The New York Times commented, "A symbol of peace brought down by his own mistake." McCartney was held for 9 days at Tokyo Detention Center. Each day he was allowed outside for only 10 minutes, had no contact with family, and slept on a bamboo mat. A close friend later said that when he returned home, McCartney looked like a man who had just survived a nightmare. The Japan tour was canceled, costing millions of dollars, and his reputation collapsed overnight. When asked about the incident later, McCartney simply said, "The stupidest moment of my life." But those close to him claimed he was haunted for years, terrified of knocks on the door at night, and anxious whenever he heard the phrase "security check." Deep down, He may have always felt that he was still on trial, not just by the court, but by the world itself. What chills people today is how history seems to repeat itself. In 1970, McCartney was isolated for suing his friends. In 1980, he was detained for a personal mistake. And now, at 83, his name once again appears beside the same words: detained, investigated, legal issue. Cultural analysts in the UK now call McCartney the man who bears the Beatles' curse. Musicology professor John Harris of Cambridge University explained, McCartney has never escaped the legal shadow of the Beatles. He's lived his entire life fearing the loss of what he created. And perhaps that's why many today believe that every incident surrounding McCartney, from his declining health to emotional exhaustion, and now these mysterious reports of being taken in for questioning, are all echoes of wounds that never fully healed. Early one morning in June 2025, residents near Paul McCartney's East Sussex farm reported seeing ambulances and police cars racing down the narrow road toward the highway. Just hours later, multiple outlets broke the news. Paul McCartney had collapsed at home and was rushed to Liverpool Royal University Hospital in critical condition. The story spread so fast that the hashtag #PrayForPaul topped global trends within 2 hours. According to reports, McCartney was unconscious for more than 3 minutes. His blood pressure had dropped to 70/40th millimeter of mercury, and his heart rate fell below 40 beats per minute, a potentially fatal number for someone his age. A paramedic who took part in the rescue said he was taken straight to the ICU with little response to auditory stimulation. That same day, BBC News reported that McCartney had suffered an acute cardiac arrhythmia with mild cerebral hypoxia, forcing doctors to use electric shocks and medication to stabilize his heartbeat. The news came as a shock since Paul was known for his exceptionally healthy lifestyle. He had been a strict vegetarian for over 40 years, didn't smoke, avoided alcohol, practiced yoga daily, and often cycled around his farm. That's why his sudden collapse left both fans and doctors asking, could his body have been fighting a deeper hidden illness all along? His wife, Nancy, later released a brief statement. Paul is in recovery, but his condition remains delicate. However, sources claim McCartney might be suffering from chronic cardiac fatigue syndrome, a rare condition where the heart loses its pumping efficiency after years of prolonged stress. Doctors said patients with this syndrome often experience dizziness, fatigue, irregular heartbeat, and sleep disturbances, particularly those with a history of cardiac surgery.